I tried dating the nice guy, and it was a total nightmare. So I, 26F, was dating Tim, 28M, until recently and before anyone asks. How could you not see the red flags? Trust me, I've been asking myself the same thing every day since. The thing is, I've always gravitated toward dating men who were not the best choices. Tattooed bartenders, flaky musicians, guys who disappear for 3 days, and then show up with flowers and apologies. It was messy, but at least it was familiar. My friends used to joke that I was addicted to drama. Maybe they weren't wrong. Then came Tim. Tim and I worked in the same office building. We weren't on the same team, but we saw each other often. He was polite, considerate, always smiling, and always offering to grab an extra coffee for whoever was nearby. He had a reputation at work for being the nicest guy in the office. When I first met him, I thought he was nice but kind of boring. He dressed neatly, never raised his voice, and never said anything controversial. Over time, he started noticing little things about me and doing thoughtful gestures, like remembering my coffee order, noticing a new haircut, and even complimenting my earrings. One morning, when my car battery died, he offered to drive me to work for the rest of the week until I got it replaced. He didn't just talk about being helpful. He actually followed through, and I'll admit, that felt refreshing. My friends teased me, saying, Don't you dare give the office nice guy a shot. They said I'd get bored. They said it never works out when I try to fix my taste by swinging the opposite direction. But I thought, maybe that's the problem. I've been chasing chaos instead of stability. Maybe this time, I should give the nice guy a chance. So I did. A week later, we officially started dating. Our first date was sweet but awkward. He took me to a quiet Italian restaurant, pulled out my chair and asked thoughtful questions about my family, my goals, and my favorite books. He admitted he was nervous, that he hadn't dated much. He blushed when I touched his hand. I went home thinking, maybe this is exactly what I need. The first few weeks were almost perfect. He texted good morning, checked in after work, and even cooked me dinner at his place. I felt safe. I felt cherished. And I told my friends, half joking but half serious, maybe the nice guy does win. But then little things started to feel off. One night, I mentioned I was grabbing drinks with my coworker Jake. Totally platonic, just unwinding after a stressful day. Tim's face changed. He didn't yell or accuse me of anything, but he got quiet and asked, Do you think that's a good idea? Spending time alone with another guy? I laughed it off, told him he had nothing to worry about, and he nodded. But later that night, he sent me this long text about how he trusted me completely, but sometimes felt invisible compared to the other people in my life. I brushed it off as insecurity. Everyone has a few, right? Then came the guilt trips. If I didn't reply to a text fast enough, he'd send a sad face and then follow it with, I guess I'm just not a priority for you. If I canceled plans because of work, he'd complain that he was sitting at home alone, wondering why he wasn't good enough. My friends started to notice what was going on. At brunch one weekend, my phone lit up with 10 messages from Tim in a row, each one more desperate than the last. They gave me looks, asked why I was putting up with it, but I just laughed it off. That same weekend, I went to my favorite coffee shop to read, not telling anyone where I was going. 10 minutes later, Tim walked in. He acted casual, like it was a coincidence. But when I asked if he had followed me, he just smiled and said, I had a feeling you'd be here, before sitting down and watching me over his cup. Then he started showing up everywhere. At the grocery store, I saw him out of the corner of my eye, pretending to browse the shelves, but somehow always ending up in the same aisle as me. He also started showing up at my gym. Even though he'd always said he hated working out, he would appear on the treadmill across from me and pretend it was a coincidence, saying, What are the odds? Guess we're just connected. It made me feel uneasy. I couldn't stop wondering how he always seemed to know exactly where I was, but I kept convincing myself I was just being paranoid. By this point, my friends had started to hate him. They kept warning me that his behavior was manipulative and controlling, and every time we hung out, our conversations inevitably circled back to how horrible Tim is. I found myself awkwardly defending him more than I should, even when I could feel something was off. When I finally brought up his behavior, he immediately turned it around. He said my friends were just jealous, trying to sabotage our relationship, because they couldn't stand to see me happy. Then came a dinner party that my best friend Aria invited us to. Tim acted perfectly normal, polite, and composed. But when I got up to help Aria in the kitchen, he followed me in and whispered, Where do you think you're going? You're not allowed to leave me out there alone." Arya overheard and told Tim to stop it. He snapped back, accusing her of trying to ruin us. Suddenly, they were screaming at each other in the kitchen, and I was in the middle, literally crying while trying to calm them down. After the dinner party, my friends finally confronted me about Tim, and they didn't hold back. Arya told me straight up that she couldn't keep watching Tim take over my life. She said my spark was gone and that I second-guessed everything I said or did around him. My other friends jumped in, pointing out the constant messages and guilt trips. They begged me to break up with him before it was too late. And then, out of nowhere, Tim appeared in the restaurant. He walked into the restaurant like he owned the place and slid into the booth next to me. My friends were stunned. He put his arm around me and said, "Hey babe, thought I'd surprise you." Arya lost it. She told him to leave. He looked at me and said, "See how they treat me? They hate me because they can't control you anymore." The table exploded. People were staring. He and my friends were shouting at each other. Then he finally stood up, slammed his hand on the table and threw a glass across the room, shattering it against the wall. He stormed out, slamming the restaurant door behind him. I froze, heart racing. My friends quickly moved closer. Arya grabbed my arm and said, "Just stay here. Don't follow him." The others nodded, warning me I shouldn't be alone with him after that. They wanted me to stay with them that night. I told them I'd think about it. But then I left to find him. I know. Reading that back makes me want to scream at myself. At the time, all I felt was guilt. He always made himself out to be the abandoned, unloved victim, and I felt like I was the only one who cared. Leaving him would mean proving him right that he was unworthy, unlovable, and disposable. From there, the manipulations only grew. He would say things like how people didn't appreciate what we have, or that if he ever lost me, he didn't know what he'd do. One night, while we were watching a movie, he leaned over and whispered, "You'd never leave me, right? You're not like them. You're the only one who understands me." When I hesitated even just for a second, his whole face changed. He repeated, "Right?" And I found myself nodding because I was scared not to. I started noticing subtle changes in my apartment. My window opened slightly when I never touched it. A dish in the sink when I'd washed them all the night before. I told myself I was imagining it. Until one night, I came home early and found him inside my apartment. He said he'd used the spare key I'd given him just to surprise me with dinner. Except there was no dinner, no groceries, nothing. He was just sitting on my couch in the dark, waiting. I should have thrown him out. Instead, I told myself he was just trying his best and that his idea of romance was warped but well-meaning. I cooked him dinner that night, trying to pretend it was normal. Then came Arya's birthday party, 2 weeks ago. I went to her birthday party without him. I knew if I told him, he'd come, so I lied and said I was working late. Halfway through the night, I went to the bathroom and saw my phone had 30 missed calls and a bunch of messages from Tim saying, "Why are you lying to me? I can see where you are. You're choosing them over me. And you'll regret this." When I came out, he was there, standing outside the bathroom door in Arya's house. I don't even remember how he got in. I just remember Arya screaming at him to get out. He shouted back that I was his, and they had no right to interfere. A couple of guests jumped in and dragged him out. I was shaking so badly I could barely stand. Arya begged me to call the police. I didn't. I told her I needed to handle it privately. I left the party without really knowing what to do next. But when I got home that night, he was sitting on the curb outside my building, crying. I didn't call the cops. I sat with him and listened as he told me how scared he was of losing me, how I was all he had, how he didn't mean any of it. I ended up comforting him. I should have left that night, but I didn't. I kept telling myself I'd break it off soon, that I just needed the right moment. But the right moment never came, because he was always there. Always. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and check my phone to find missed calls at 2, 3, and 4 a.m. If I didn't answer, he'd show up outside my building. I started pulling my blinds closed all the time because I swore I saw him across the street watching me. Later, I told my friends what had been happening. After so many late-night calls, my friends came over. They sat me down and begged me to put some distance between myself and Tim. Of course Tim found out. He said he'd been worried when he saw them leaving my building. That night, he accused me of plotting against him with them, like I was betraying him. He said, "If you choose them, you're killing me." The words sent a chill through me. They didn't sound like a figure of speech. The next week was the longest of my life. He became more demanding, more intense. He called me every hour at work. If I didn't answer, he'd show up at the office lobby. My boss pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay. I lied again. Then came the night I'll never forget. I got home from work really late, around 10 p.m. The hallway to my apartment was dark. When I unlocked my door, I immediately knew something was wrong. My lights were off, but there was the faint smell of cologne. His cologne. My whole body was screaming at me to run. But before I could, the door shut behind me. He was inside. Tim stepped out of the shadows like it was nothing. He said, "You weren't answering. I thought maybe something happened to you." His tone was calm, but his eyes were wild, restless, like he hadn't slept in days. I tried to play it cool. I told him he needed to leave, that it was late. He didn't move. Then he pulled something out of his pocket. At first, I thought it was a knife. My heart stopped, but it wasn't. It was the spare key I had given him long ago. He held it up casually, smiling, and said, "See this? You can't get rid of me. I will always come back." I snapped. All the fear, the guilt, the weeks of gaslighting, it boiled over. I shouted at him, told him this was over, that he was scaring me, that he needed help. I told him if he didn't leave, I'd call the police. His whole expression changed and he said, "You'd call the police on me? After everything I've done for you?" His voice rose louder than I'd ever heard. "You're just like the rest. You pretend to care, but you'll throw me away the second I'm inconvenient." He stepped closer. I backed up into the kitchen, my hands shaking so badly. I could barely hold my phone. He kept talking, fast and frantic, about how I was the only one who understood him. How if I left, he'd have nothing. How maybe it would be better if we both disappeared so no one could tear us apart. That was the moment I knew I wasn't safe. I dialed 911. He lunged for my phone, grabbed my wrists, and we struggled while I screamed. The operator heard everything. I managed to shout my address before he knocked the phone out of my hand. He kept repeating, "Why are you doing this? Why are you making me the bad guy?" The police arrived faster than I expected. The pounding on the door made him freeze. He whispered, "Don't let them take me. Please." I didn't answer. I just opened the door. They pulled him out while he shouted my name, begging me to explain and to fix things. I was left in shock, my heart racing. I called Aria, and she stayed with me that night. She didn't lecture me or say, "I told you so." She just held me while I cried. I wouldn't have made it through without her or without my other friends. They had been there for me through everything, and I'm so grateful for their support. In the days that followed, the situation escalated quickly. Tim was arrested for trespassing and harassment. The police collected my 911 call, his messages, and statements from friends who had witnessed his behavior as evidence. They also discovered hidden GPS trackers on my car and documented the times he had used the spare key to enter my apartment without my knowledge. I was granted a temporary restraining order, keeping him at least 500 feet away, giving me a measure of safety I desperately needed. Looking back, I can see what staying in that relationship cost me. I wasn't giving the nice guy a chance. I kept ignoring warning signs and letting him push past my boundaries. I let guilt and fear guide my choices until I felt trapped. Ending things wasn't just a breakup. It was reclaiming my life. After that, I focused on protecting myself and beginning to heal. My building changed the locks, gave me new keys, and instructed staff to watch for him. HR at work flagged my file for security and let me adjust my schedule when needed. I cut all contact, blocked his number, deleted him from social media, and even switched to a new phone. Even with these measures, I sometimes catch myself scanning crowds, tense and alert, as if expecting him to appear. I'm moving soon and have started therapy to help process everything. Writing this still feels unreal, but it happened. And I don't think I'll ever look at the phrase "nice guy" the same way again. And just like that, we've reached the end. There's more on the way, so don't forget to like and subscribe.